So the blockchain that half the internet spent the last 2 years calling a ghost town just did something no other blockchain has ever done. It plugged itself directly into Ethereum. Not through one of those sketchy bridges that keep getting drained for hundreds of millions. A direct, cryptographically verified connection. The network is called Cosmos. And here's the part that gets me. It quietly became the plumbing underneath more than 100 blockchains you already use. And yet its own token, Atom, spent years as the punchline, because critics said it captured almost none of the value it created. So how does a project invent the whole idea of an internet of blockchains, get left for dead, and then come roaring back in 2026 by connecting to its biggest rival? Where did it come from? Who's running it now? And why should you care? Let's get into it. To understand Cosmos, you go back to 2014 and a developer named Jay Kwan. And his background isn't what you'd guess. Cornell Computer Science, and before crypto, he was the lead mobile developer at Yelp, the guy who built their iPhone app, a real engineer. And in 2014, he publishes a paper called Tendermint that quietly solves a problem nagging at everybody. See, Bitcoin secures itself by burning huge amounts of electricity, and it never quite finishes. You wait and hope your transaction sticks. Tendermint said, what if a set of known validators just vote on each block, and the second 2/3 agree? That block is final. Done. No takebacks. That's instant deterministic finality, and it stays safe as long as fewer than 1/3 of the validators are cheating. And here's a detail I love, because it tells you how these people think. If more than 1/3 of the validators drop offline, a Tendermint chain doesn't stumble forward and risk splitting in two. It just halts, stops and waits. Safety over uptime. Now the second idea is the one that really matters. Kwan and his co-founder Ethan Buckman, who, funny enough, came out of biophysics, looked around and asked, why is every new project rebuilding a blockchain from scratch? So they packaged it into the Cosmos SDK, a toolkit that lets you launch your own custom chain without reinventing the hard parts, with that consensus engine, later renamed Comet BFT, running underneath. They raised around $17 million in 2017, and the main network, the Cosmos Hub, with its token Atom, went live in March of 2019. And that toolkit, that's the thing that quietly took over. So here's where it gets clever. If anyone can launch a chain, you get a problem. Hundreds of little islands that can't talk to each other. Cosmos's answer is the piece you really need to know. It's called IBC, the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, and the first real transfer went through in April of 2021. And why does it matter so much? Because of how it moves value. Most bridges in crypto work by trusting a small committee to hold your money and release it on the other side. And that design is exactly what keeps getting hacked. The Ronin bridge lost over $600 million, Wormhole more than $300 million, all because you were trusting a middleman. IBC doesn't do that. Each chain runs a tiny, lightweight copy of the other chain inside itself, a light client, and it checks the other chain's own math. No committee to bribe. People call it the TCP IP for blockchains, and that's the right analogy. The same way that protocol turns separate computers into one internet, IBC turns separate blockchains into one interchain. And it worked. Today, more than 115 chains are connected through IBC, and the Cosmos toolkit powers over 200 chains in production. And you know these chains, even if nobody told you they were Cosmos. Celestia, Injective, Say, the exchange Osmosis. Noble, the chain Circle uses to issue native USDC everywhere. And here's a great one. dYdX, one of the biggest derivatives exchanges in crypto, left Ethereum entirely to build its own chain on Cosmos. Even Binance's original chain runs on forked Cosmos code. So while everyone argued about Cosmos, it quietly became the infrastructure underneath a huge chunk of the industry. So if Cosmos is everywhere, why did people write it off? This is the honest part. And it's worth understanding because it's a genuinely hard problem. It comes down to one word: value. The whole magic of Cosmos is that every chain is sovereign, independent, its own validators, its own token, its own rules. Beautiful for builders, but it means none of those chains have to send anything back to Atom, the Cosmos Hub's token. So Cosmos, the technology, was winning everywhere, while Atom, the token, captured almost none of it. Critics said, "You built the roads and forgot to put up a single toll booth." And Cosmos, being Cosmos, tried to fix it in the most on-brand way possible, by putting it to a vote. In late 2022, there was an ambitious plan called Atom 2.0, a full redesign of the token's economics. And it's a wild story, because it didn't just lose. About 48% voted yes, almost nobody voted plain no, but roughly 37% used a special no with veto option. And in Cosmos, if more than a third veto something, it dies automatically. So a minority vetoed the majority, and the flagship plan just evaporated. And around then, there was a leadership vacuum. Jay Kwan had stepped back from day-to-day leadership all the way back in January of 2020. Lots of funded teams, no single hand on the wheel. They even tried a feature called Interchain security, where the hub rents its validators to protect smaller chains and finally earn fees. It worked, a little. But then Neutron, the very first chain to use it, graduated off in 2025 to become fully independent. So even the value capture experiment chose freedom. And look, none of this is a knock. It's the honest cost of a real principle: sovereignty over control. But it's exactly the mess that set up what happened next. So here's the turn. At the end of 2024, the Interchain Foundation, the Swiss nonprofit that stewards Cosmos, acquired a team called Skip, one of the sharpest engineering crews in the ecosystem. Its two co-founders, Barry Plunkett and Magnus Marinek, came in as co-CEOs, and over 2025, that team was rebranded, first to Interchain Labs, then in September to Cosmos Labs. And why does that matter? Because for the first time in years, there's a single, focused company whose whole job is to make the Cosmos stack fast, reliable, and frankly boring in the way enterprises love. That's the fix for the leadership vacuum, and they moved fast. This past June, in 2026, Cosmos Labs bought MintScan, the block explorer everyone on Cosmos uses, and spun up a new office, Cosmos Labs Korea in Seoul, which is basically where Atom first caught fire. And then there's the roadmap, and this is the tell. I want to be precise here because it matters for trust. These are targets, not things that have shipped. But the targets point straight at one thing: financial settlement. They're going after 5,000 transactions a second in sustained production and half-second block times. And they're adding features that only make sense if you're courting banks, like a permissioned, token-free mode for institutions that don't want a volatile crypto asset sitting in the middle of settlement. So, read the signal. The messy, sprawling, sovereign experiment is deliberately reshaping itself into settlement infrastructure. Which brings us to the headline. Okay, the big one. In April of 2025, Cosmos shipped an upgrade called IBC Eureka. And Eureka does the thing everyone said IBC never could. It extends the interchain beyond Cosmos and connects it directly to Ethereum. Ethereum is the first non-Cosmos chain ever brought onto IBC, and it's live on mainnet right now. And I know your next question because it was mine. How is that not just another bridge waiting to get drained? Here's the beautiful part. Remember light clients, math instead of a trusted committee? Eureka pulls that off in both directions using zero-knowledge proofs. A little Ethereum light client lives as a contract on the Cosmos hub, and on the Ethereum side, a company called Succinct runs a prover that posts cryptographic proofs of Cosmos's consensus onto Ethereum. So the two giants verify each other with math, not middlemen. Per Cosmos's own launch data, more than $1 million moved across it in the first hours, and Solana, Base, and Arbitrum are next, still in development. And this is where it stops being a crypto nerd story. Because who wants trust-minimized settlement between chains? Institutions. In Japan, a platform called Progmat, backed by the giant Mitsubishi UFJ Trust, reached around 48% of the country's tokenized asset issuance in 2024, and it runs on Cosmos Interoperability. That figure's from Cosmos, so take the exact number lightly, but the direction is real. Japan's 3 megabanks are now working on moving stablecoins across borders on this kind of rail. And Cosmos is quietly becoming home to a wave of AI chains too, like Fetch.ai, Akash, and Allura, where autonomous agents need cheap, verifiable settlement. Now, one honest note, because we don't do hype here. There's a proposal working through Cosmos governance to finally link Atom to real fee revenue. It's a proposal. It's not live. The numbers could change, and I won't pretend otherwise. So here's your actual takeaway, something you can do, not buy. Go to MintScan, the Explorer Cosmos Labs now owns, and watch the Eureka transfers between Cosmos and Ethereum happen for yourself. Don't trust the story, go watch the flows. Verify, don't trust. So let's pull it together. Cosmos started as one engineer's answer to a hard consensus problem, and grew into an internet of over 100 sovereign blockchains. A genuinely new idea that also created a genuinely hard problem, because the network kept winning while its token kept getting left out. And instead of quietly fading, in 2026 it did the opposite. New leadership under Cosmos Labs, a roadmap aimed straight at financial settlement, and IBC Eureka reaching out and shaking hands with Ethereum using pure math. Whether Atom finally captures that value is still an open question, and I'll keep tracking it honestly. But the bet is clear. Being the neutral fabric everyone else settles on might just beat being one more chain fighting for attention. And that's a bet worth watching. If you got something out of this, do me a quick favor and subscribe. I go deep on the projects quietly rebuilding how value actually moves between networks, minus the hype, minus the price talk. The full write-up, with every single source linked, is in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.